Today on This Week in Music, we talk to a former SVP from Country Music Television who's just started a new model record label called DigSin. Jay Frank is our guest. Stay tuned.
I feel good, even though I shouldn't. I'm chilling so hard, couldn't tell you where the hood is. I'm looking like $1,000,000, sucker.
Welcome back to This Week in Music. My name's Ian Rogers, and my guest today is Jay Frank. Most recently, Jay was the SVP of Music Strategy at Country Music Television. I first met Jay when he was at Yahoo Music, where I was as well, and now Jay has started a new model record label called DigSin. Thanks, Jay.
Hey, Ian. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Welcome.
Thanks.
So, I dig sin.
We all dig sin, don't we?
You get the little dig sin button there with the I like it's got the spindle like I would put in my 45 right on the devil
little
ears.
Subtle single knot over there.
Right.
Absolutely.
What is DigSin?
DigSin is something that I created and I've been thinking about for a while to say, how can we remodel what a record company is? Not to replicate what major labels are doing, but to do something that actually can complement it. So I started thinking about a business based on how people are consuming music versus how we'd wish that they'd consume music. And if we build the model at its core from actually how they consume music, then we might actually be able to build something successful. So we're releasing a single. DigSin is short for digital single. And anybody can go to DigSin.com, just give us their email address through Topspin Widget, and you will then be able to subscribe to every release that we have for free for life. So we will give you all of your music for free, all of our music. But what we're doing from that is we will then not only be able to give away those downloads through ad-supported mechanisms, which I believe is going to be a portion of revenue moving forward, we also are going to be able to get analytics. So we look to everybody who responds to the song, and we're able to get a profile of who the fan of that artist is. Through that, we can then be able to market directly through social networking to be able to get a better idea of the profile of that artist, and then fine-tune it so that we are doing effective marketing that doesn't cost us a lot of money to reach the right people versus just putting out the fire hose and hoping for the best. If we do that effectively, then we'll know exactly what songs are going to be successful and be able to make them successful.
So you'll change who you sign based on the consumers that you're fans that you find yourself interacting with.
Absolutely, and if we do it right and are nimble enough, then we can also potentially pick up on trends earlier and maybe even be a part of those trends.
Right, I like it. I mean, you've kind of gone back to the consumer end of the value chain, if you will, and you've said, all right, well, how do consumers behave? Mm-hmm. What do they want? How can I craft something that fits their behavior? Instead of trying to control their behavior.
Right, and I think the difficulty is that the album is a marketing concept. I mean, there's a lot of us, myself included, I'm sure you are, who have hold albums near and dear to our hearts. But the reality is that they're just marketing concepts. Singles are just marketing concepts. So I'm looking at a core question, which is every artist puts their life blood into each song. And in the course of albums now, because there are so many albums, 3,000 plus albums released every single week, most of those songs basically go unnoticed, or they're not given a chance. People nowadays, if they get to a point of listening to an album, listen to it, get distracted, and then cherry pick a couple of songs that they really like. So with some exceptions of artists that we both know who do albums for artistic sake, most songs go unnoticed. So to me, if we go back to fundamentally marketing as a concept, each song as singles, those songs will have more attention placed on them, the consumer will be able to focus on them better, and then therefore create more valuable copyrights over more songs over a period of time.
Well, and it sounds like you're kind of going back to what the music industry was at its inception, mm-hmm. Which is a singles business, and you can get those singles out there really quickly. You record something, this morning, they used to get it pressed up and run it down to the station in the afternoon, right? Yep. And that's sort of the world that we're living in. It seems to me that a lot of what you're doing is it has to do with signing artists and developing artists, or at least and helping them develop these songs. But a lot of it, as you alluded to in the very beginning, is related to marketing, mm-hmm. Related to how do you do better marketing based on data.
Yeah.
Are you a content company or are you a marketing company?
We're both. And I think that we provide the marketing resources to artists that we sign to our company, but we're not a work for hire, because I think that a work for hire model in this case doesn't do the artist good. I mean, we're going to provide services that are worth thousands of dollars per month, and I could go to an artist and say, I'll charge you that value, and then if nothing happens, then I go and say, oh, sorry, nothing happens, but let me take a lot of your money that you have a very difficult time making. Versus coming and saying, I'm a content company, I will go and acquire some of your copyrights and be able to work them in a marketing capacity, and based on the structure of my deals, I don't make money unless you make money. So I have to make this work for you in order for it to be profitable for myself. That puts us into a partnership situation, which I think serves that song much better.
So how do you choose an artist? How many artists have you chosen thus far? I mean, you've only been up and running for how long now?
We only started business about 6 weeks ago, beginning of October of 2000.
Have you built a roster yet?
We've got our first 2 artists signed. I've got a verbal commitment on another artist, and we're close on 2 others. But I'm probably not going to go past 6 artists from the beginning, just because I don't think I'd have the capacity to market more than that effectively.
And that's 6 artists, that's 6 songs, or how are you approaching it?
Well, it initially will be 6 songs. Each artist's deal is for 6 songs total. And I'm not trying to, as sin, be about the number 6. However, right. We sign an artist for 6 songs, 2 songs firm, an option for 4 more songs, and then that's it. I look at most label deals where you get into long-term relationships with artists. And if you really have to think about it, well, verbally the artists most of the time complain about the fact that they don't get paid. The reality is, I think for the most part, their biggest gripe is probably that they are indentured to a particular company for a much longer period than they'd wish. So I'm trying to eliminate that by not having that. I personally think that I can make a valuable business out of the right songs if I'm able to pick and cost-effectively market the songs effectively. From that perspective, we're going to release a single by each artist, and then probably after we get through one single by all 6, then we'll go back and release their second singles and their third singles and start building up their audience and their fan base, and hopefully each subsequent single will grow, which will then in turn grow the artist.
Right. Well, and what happens when you get to the end of the term? Do you imagine yourself only in kind of this initial phase where it's an unknown artist and it's their first 6 songs, or do you think that you'll carry on with them afterwards?
Some artists, I think, will like what we offer, and they'll just want to roll over their deal. And some artists will graduate to majors, and some artists will not work, and we'll both part ways. But ultimately, for me, I'm trying to create what I call a mutual fund company. There are too many companies that I've seen on the major side of things where they're all ready to release their superstar record in that quarter. They put a lot of energy behind it, and for whatever reason, the superstar record's just not up to snuff. And then it underperforms. And their whole year is blown because it undersells what they were hoping it's going to be, and they have hundreds of thousands of copies stuck on store shelves. By myself not getting into a long-term deal, I'm trying to create copyrights based on individual songs, and therefore my whole business will likely not be predicated on having to have one song or one artist really perform. I can be able to create a depth of catalog that allows variety, so that I'm probably be able to put together more steady returns that will allow me to operate a more stable business, which is something that eludes the music business on a regular basis.
And what's your ownership? Is it on the publishing side as well as the recorded music side?
Yeah, for these particular songs, I focus on the 360 of a song versus the 360 of the artist. So the trade-off is that for those individual songs, not for their careers, but for those songs, I will have copyrights for master and publishing, but I will get nothing from touring, and I will get nothing from personal appearances or other things like that, just specifically around those songs.
So you're interested in not only these songs selling on iTunes or streaming on Spotify, but you're also interested in those songs getting placed somewhere. Is that a big part of your business, looking to get these songs into a television show or a movie?
My belief is that the recorded music business will look a lot more like the publishing business in the next 5 to 10 years, in the sense that the business will be about collecting pennies, nickels, and dimes from hundreds, if not thousands, of sources versus collecting dollars from a handful of sources. I'm preparing for that from the beginning, and because that's how I look at the digital space right now, because it is about collecting a bit of money from Spotify and Rdio and iTunes and Amazon and Simfy and We7 and Film and TV and Radio Play and iHeartRadio and on and on and on. So I'm looking at saying I'm going to make my money because it's going to be $20 from here, $500 from there, that will all add up to something that works for both us and the artist.
Got you. Huh. Okay, so can you tell us about who the artists are that you've started with?
Not yet, but sign up at DigSin.com, and the day that the songs are released, you'll be the first person to hear it.
Okay, and so tell me a little bit about your background. Where did you come from? I mean, you and I have known each other for a while, but
Yeah.
share with our audience
Sure.
how you got started and ended up where you are.
I think I've just like I know you were, just been a music junkie. Probably my first entry into the music business was selling my baseball cards to buy DJing equipment. Then I created one of the first music video shows run out of a high school back in the 80s, and then did everything I could think of. Ran a college radio station, managed a record store, managed a nightclub, booked bands, managed bands, wrote music reviews for my local music paper. I mean, I used to joke that over the course of my career I've done everything except for publishing, and now I'm a publishing company as well, so
Right.
now I've covered all the bases.
Right.
And then managed a failed independent record label in the mid-90s, the Box Music Network. I went to program that in the late 90s, which if you were around in the 90s, was one of the first interactive
Yeah, tell people what the
videos
Box
networks.
was. I mean, because you kind of either know or you don't when it comes to the Box.
The Box was interesting because it was the first interactive television channel that was around music videos. You'd call a 900 number and be able to request a video. This guy's, for example,
yeah.
and then that video would show up, and it would show up on your cable network. But the interesting thing for me is that it did two things for me. Is that it was really the beginning for me, both in terms of digital, because we had a web play going on before web plays were really there, and trying to get people interacting with music videos online. But the other thing is that it really got me started on analytics, because what we were able to do was get true audience feedback based on who was willing to spend $1.99 to watch a video. And so we were making our programming decisions based on how many people were calling, but not only that, knowing that they were calling in different places of the country, knowing that New Orleans reacted differently than Salt Lake City, that reacted differently than the middle of New Jersey.
How do you correct that data for the fact that labels were jamming those 900 numbers? Because that was the case, right?
That was the case.
There were label spends on getting plays on the Box.
Yeah, there were label spends, because it's really easy. Like if you look at it from the label perspective, you have to spend $1.99 to get 4 minutes of TV time. I'll spend that, thank you very much.
Yeah.
By the time I had gotten to the Box, they'd already created the system that essentially corralled the labels so that we could separate those calls from other calls. But that enabled us to really get at the heart of the data. That didn't make up for the fact that I remember one time we saw a spike in a Tupac video in a particular market, and we thought, wow, that's really strange. Why did this get so hot? And then we went into the data and discovered that a guy was drunk on a Saturday night and called 90 times in a 6-hour period. Right. So those things happen too.
Sure.
But ultimately, though, it really got me into analytics, and through those we were able to go and quickly see new artists and new songs that were breaking. I mean, to me, one of my finest moments in the music business was in the same month we broke Ja Rule and we broke Slipknot. And we were able to see in different areas of the country that both of those artists were reacting hugely, and be able to play them very early on in their career and help gain some momentum for them. So that was to me the start of the importance of analytics, and this is back in 1997.
And you did a lot of this at launch and later Yahoo Music as well too. I mean, tell a couple of those stories, because they were always some of the most amazing things that I think launch and Yahoo Music did.
Sure. Well, that was one of the fun things about us working together, was not just going in there and saying, hey, we have a platform off of a really big ISP to be able to get the word out there and be able to promote the music, but be able to get the feedback and be able to get the data. I mean, you remember, we were, I like to tell people is that we were the first company to have data on 1 billion pieces of song plays a month. It was the first company to reach 1 billion song plays in a month, and
right.
I think that's pretty.
Tell people how we had that data.
Yeah, we had that data through music video plays. Yahoo Music in the mid 2000s was the largest music video outlet online, and then the radio player Launchcast, which in some ways is a precursor to what everybody feels Pandora is right now, was the largest radio player online. And through those two things, you basically had over 1 billion song plays a month, and people got to rate those songs and get a better personalized experience based on those ratings. Right. So people were encouraged to do it. But the cool thing was we were looking at not only the explicit ratings of somebody saying, I like this song, and give it a, on a scale of 0 to 100, give it 100, but we were also looking at implicit ratings. We were looking at what people were actually doing. We created a we created a metric called the exit rate, which was measuring how long somebody listened to a song to be able to determine, did people listen to long periods of the song or did they bail out of the song quickly? Really being able to get a true picture for the people that just didn't want to take the time to rate, well, what were they really doing? Just because somebody listened to the song, just like page views on a website, it's not really a valid metric because you can get a lot of page views, but they could be meaningless. Same thing, you can get a lot of song plays and they can still be meaningless. So we utilize that to be able to better predict which songs were going to be bigger than not, and sometimes we were right. Bands like My Chemical Romance, for example, that we were able to identify early on and produce a big push that eventually gave Warner Brothers the impetus to go and spend a lot of money that then made them platinum stars. Or on the other side,
how would that work? I mean, you know, you would be. I want to dumb it down for the audience. So Launchcast has millions of people listening to it. You could take a song from the programming team, insert it into a lot of people's streams. You would get tens of thousands of listens on anything you sort of put out there.
Right.
And then you could just look, and when you could see when something is really reactive. Wow, a lot of people who've never heard this song before are loving it. And then you would call the label and say, you guys have a hit?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, that was pretty much it. I mean, you know, to me, a lot of what I try to do is that looking at the pessimism of the music business in the last decade is the best way to turn it around is to be positive and to be able to share that positive information so that all of our businesses can grow collectively. So to me, when we go and we saw that information, you know, and we were all doing this manually because, you know, in 2004, the computing power, as you know, wasn't really there to truly parse all this data. I mean, we tried. We worked, you know, you and I worked for 2 years trying to make a lot of the stuff that companies are just now coming to market with in terms of analytics.
Yeah.
But we, you know, we'd be able to take my know-how of the music business and just, you know, general knowledge of saying, okay, I've seen this pattern before. I've seen early adopters react this strongly, this quickly, knowing that this was reactive above baseline to other songs of that genre, to be able to go and, yes, to go tell the record label, hey, you've got a hit on our hands. And then when we did that, that enabled us to be able to then have a deeper relationship with the artist and to be able for them to say, yeah, you did play a role in breaking us, and that provided extra value to the company.
What are some other examples? I remember the Sean Kingston example.
Sean Kingston was one that was there. You know, there was a slew of various rappers, and then there was some fun novelty stuff. There was a mid-90s novelty rap record called Laffy Taffy that was a big record for us early on. You know, and then there was some stuff that didn't work. I mean, you know, one of the things that was really, Jason Mraz was another one that was really huge. I mean, Jason Mraz was very interesting because the label was really about ready to give up on him and his first single. It just wasn't happening. But we clearly saw all of this information, and we ended up compiling a report for them, and then they took that data, that 10 pages of data, and brought that to MTV. That convinced MTV to start playing it, and then when MTV got the reaction to it, then they took the same data and went to radio stations, and it eventually became a top 10 hit, and now Jason Mraz is a career artist. Right. But if we had not actually gone in and made the effort to actually identify that he actually was a hit and then share that information, Jason Mraz would be a footnote in the music business right now.
So you left Yahoo Music and went to Nashville, and I always thought that was such a great move for you, and I'll tell you why personally. The barbecue, but I know you as a lover of popular music, and not only not only as a lover of the music, but as someone who is intensely interested in how something makes it, out of somebody's head, into a recording, and then, into the public consciousness. Yeah. I also believe that we are, moving from a mass market to massive niches. Mm-hmm. And so when you went from Yahoo to CMT, I thought that was a perfect move for you because country is a large popular music niche. How did, is that accurate, and how did you find it when you landed?
It was, but I actually took it from a little bit of a different approach, whereas at Yahoo, we were working with a multitude of genres on one platform, the web at the time. Mobile hadn't really come about. And then going to CMT, I basically flipped it, and I said, I'm going to start working on one genre that was exposed on a multitude of platforms, because CMT, by that time, had just gotten its sea legs in terms of its website presence and its mobile presence, and it was just getting ready to start a syndicated nightly radio show, film division. So there was a multitude of presences that CMT was able to control. So to me, the interesting thing was like, okay, now can we take analytics, and then can we take an actual control over multitudes of different types of screens and actually be able to make music, break music through a coordinated effort across a multitude of screens. And that's really, you know, the fact that it was country wasn't a, you know, it was interesting to me. It is a form of popular music, and I like a lot of stuff that was coming out. Taylor Swift was one of the last artists that I did a lot of work with in terms of breaking things on Yahoo, and through that I could see that she was going to, at least for the short term, produce a growth in country music awareness in general. And so I kind of put all those things together to be able to really do it, and that was probably the most fun I had at CMT, was just taking on that challenge of, because there aren't a lot of other opportunities. You know, Clear Channel has radio, and now they're trying to get into the web, and you know, it's still early goings to really feel the results, but you know, they're doing early goings in 2011. It's you know, kind of an interesting proposition. But for me, it was really about saying, you know, there really is that ability. People use multiple screens. People use brands on multiple screens right now. And so it just makes sense to be able to say, to coordinate those efforts, as opposed to many companies that have multiple screens where they silo them in different departments.
Right. Well, I want to be sure we spend some time talking about the books that you've written as well, and try to get some practical advice out there for you know, artists that might be watching. So you just finished your second book, which is called Hack Your Hit, right? And I actually, you know, that doesn't exist in printed form. Is that true?
It's coming out. It'll be out in early February. So we're finalizing the galleys right now and almost ready to get that out.
Okay, so and then this is a copy of your first book, which is called Futurehit.DNA.
Futurehit.DNA.
Futurehit.DNA, sorry. And tell us about why, and let's start with the first one. Why'd you write it, and what's it about?
Well, I think I wrote it. You know, I started writing it while I was at Yahoo, and it was. I started writing it for all the reasons we just talked about. As we started finding certain bands coming up and being able to predict certain bands' success early on, I started thinking about, well, why this song? Why are these things actually popping? And then I started to start subtly seeing some commonalities and some general themes that were repeating in the songs. So I started digging in a little bit more into the data, try to start corroborating as much as I could the data from other sources. But then I also spent a lot of time thinking about the psychology behind it. And then I started putting those two together and try to put pen to paper and say, all right, can this actually form into a book? Because I felt that, you know, for years people would always say, well, how do I make a song ready for radio? That was their key component. And in 2005, when I started writing this book, I started saying, well, the key questions that's going to need to be asked is those same people who wanted to know how to make a song ready for radio are going to need to know how to make a song ready for the internet. And you have to say that if there is a corollary to say that there's a formula for radio, then there should be a formula for the internet. And it turns out that there was, but nobody was looking for it because everybody just assumed.
How different is it, the formula for radio and the formula for the web?
The biggest difference is that radio is a pushed medium. So you're pushed the music, and by being pushed the music, you are just fed. And so a lot of times people really got exposed to songs by the hook of the song. So as long as the hook was placed in the proper space and produced in the right way, it didn't really matter anything else necessarily around the song. It's all about driving through that hook and driving to that hook. The other thing is that radio were making their decisions based on call-out research, and call-out research was just playing the hook for people. So as long as they had a good hook, everything else was really secondary. Plus you also have a DJ, and the DJ talks you through intros and things like that. If you flip through stations, you stumble upon a song 2.5 minutes into the song, and it kind of catches your ear and you grow in. Those kind of things. But the internet is a pull. So you have to have actually an emotional reason to want to listen to the song in the first place, and that emotional reason may be nothing more simple than your buddy told you about it, but you need to have an emotional pull to listen to that song. Then when you go to the song, you are almost exclusively starting the song from the beginning of the song. This seems intuitive. Of course, you're going to start listening to the song from the beginning, but in the discovery process, it actually turns out that that's new, is that aside from cut 11 on the album that you listen to at home, discovering a song from the beginning of the song was a relative minority in that discovery process, and now it became the overwhelming majority. And so what ends up happening is that you had songs constructed the same way, a basic standard 16-second intro that most songs did, and the 16-second intro existed because DJs needed to talk over it. But now, on the internet, every song started with that intro, and there was no DJ. And so therefore, you had to listen to that song, and all of a sudden that 16-second intro, which was helpful for radio, is a liability online. And so what I started finding out was that songs that had shorter intros had a higher likelihood of succeeding. And so I started really talking about that and really finding what I call a 7-second rule, which is that you have to impress that listener in the first 7 seconds of the song or they're gone, because most people are going to make their decision by about the 10-second mark whether or not they're going to listen to this song or not.
Give us an example of a song that has a great, first 7 seconds.
Well, an example that I use in the book, which actually isn't from this era, is the Spice Girls' "Wannabe," and I think that one of the reasons why that song really pops is because at the very beginning of the song, all it is you've got Scary Spice just yelling, right immediately, "Yo, I'll tell you what I want, what I really, really want," and it just drags you and just grabs you right into the song.
I mean, as you mentioned it, I could hear it.
Exactly.
I haven't heard that song in years.
Right. So there's not anything to start. There's not, and you can start with, like I talk, because people say, oh, so I have to put lyrics or I have to put the chorus up front. You don't have to. Like a good AC/DC song, for example, has a great guitar riff instrumental that grabs you.
Yeah.
But most people can't necessarily create that great instrumental. And vocals are something that people have a hard time interrupting. So if you start with vocals, they are more likely to get in because people want to hear what somebody has to say.
Right.
And now I can give you numerous examples because I believe 19 of the top 20 selling songs so far this year all have intros of 7 seconds or less. The average length of an intro right now is somewhere around 4.7 seconds for the top selling songs.
Is there any change as we kind of move from internet radio into a Spotify subscription YouTube kind of world, or are these the same rules that apply?
It's essentially the same rules because it's the same thing. People discovering songs. If anything, it's just going to strengthen because it's just more discovery and listening opportunities coming from the beginning of a song. Playlists changes that a little bit, but you also have when you have a lot of people listening in various shuffle formats. It's too easy to hit the button to just go to the next one. And you think about your own listening patterns, and you realize how often you do that, and you realize that I'm making very snap decisions in the first couple of seconds of a song all the time. So I actually think that Spotify is going to exacerbate that a bit. Although there are situations within that you have control. For example, making a playlist that somebody plays at a party.
Right. Well, give us a couple more things from the book, and then I want to move on from this book, from Futurehit.DNA, and then I want to move on to what Hack Your Hit is.
Yeah, I think one of the other things I talk about in this book is the need to release more songs more often. I think too often right now as a strategy, people are not actively releasing music, but because there is so much music out there, you have to do something extra special to remind people that you're around. Now, the Coldplays and the U2s of the world have luxury to take as long as they want because they've already established a brand. But when you're Joe Schmo, you've got to actually work at it, and that audience, as any artist knows, you release an album on Monday, the audience listens to the album on Monday and go, this is fantastic, this is great, and then by Friday they're going, when's the next one coming out? Right. And that's an audience that needs to be fed, and they need to be fed constantly, and just like anywhere else, if you don't feed them, they will go away. So it's technically impossible to continually release albums on a very strongly released basis, every month, every 2 months. Certainly, even if you could do that volume of music, the quality would go down pretty substantially.
Sure.
So it's important to release a large volume of music to keep things going, and I encourage to release singles, and that's why that's why I'm forming a label based on singles, because I think that it's important for artists to actually do that. If you're feeding the audience every couple of months, then you're constantly giving them something. I think that it's a strategy that most of the artists that are doing it are finding great success with, but they have to play around with it. For some artists, releasing something every week is a cover song on YouTube, so that they're not worrying about making the best original song every 7 days. They're putting something out that they know the audience likes, but it's at least keeping the artist fresh and giving them content and keeping them engaged. So I honestly think that the artists that are taking a lot of time in the studio to really finesse something, and again, this also, as you said, goes back to the early days of the singles in the 50s and 60s. James Brown would go into a town and he'd play an early show and a late show, and then he'd pack up the band and go to the former steel mill across town that's been converted into a recording studio, and from midnight to 5 a.m. they'd bang out an A-side and B-side and roll away. Right. I think that there's not that things are going to be, you're going to need to record 2 songs in 5 hours. But I think we do have to get back to a point where artists have to spend a little bit less time in the studio and actually spend more time shipping. You know, just like in the digital business, is like if you don't ship products, it could be the death of you. You can't finesse perfection. But unfortunately,
I always think of that. I mean, we just talked about this at New Noise over the weekend, and that release early and often, which is a phrase that I learned in software, seems to apply here as well, right? I mean, it's not the case where you're releasing one version of Microsoft Word every year and a half, right? If you're not updating, your web app every 3 weeks, then you're gonna be out of date, and it's the same thing if you're an artist.
Well, and it's really interesting. I'm actually just finishing the book, The Lean Startup. I don't know, and if you read that.
Eric Ries.
Yeah, exactly. And Eric, talks about the fact that in the startup, in the digital world, that the early adopters are totally comfortable with things that are rough around the edges. As a matter of fact, they prefer it. If it's too polished, they'll actually run away thinking that it's actually too together. And I think that lesson actually applies to musicians in their stages, is that the people who are early adopters that will spread the word don't want you to be too polished, don't want you to be too fine-tuned of a product. Otherwise, they'll think, in that parlance, you're just some corporate bullshit. Yeah. So I think that that it's the same thing, that more musicians should spend more time saying, I don't have to get this exactly right. I don't have to actually make sure that my vocals are perfectly tuned. I can let a few mistakes go through, and do that to make sure that you're getting more songs out, to also better understand which types of songs work for your audience and which types of songs don't work for your audience.
Yeah, that's the amazing thing you have now too, is the feedback loop, right? I think about the shitty punk rock band I was in high school, who probably 5 people heard us over a 3-year period, right? That weren't in the band, and now we could have put those tracks out and got some feedback, and we're going, oh wow, people like that song and not that one. Let's make more of those and less of those, and that feedback loop is quick, but the feedback loop isn't quick if you don't get the content out there. All right, so that's Futurehit.DNA, which I have to say, like, artists that I work with, I feel like it's one of those books that as an artist you should read, even if you disagree with it. It's going to get you thinking about, well, how do I fit in, and how does the audience react to what I make? But tell us about Hack My Hit.
Hack Your Hit is kind of the throughputs on the book are really the same principles, which is to really be thinking about the psychology of what goes into the listening experience and what you have to do through that. And so what I did was I extended the Futurehit being about how to really craft the songs themselves, and then Hack Your Hit is more about how do you actually market those songs, and how do you actually use things to get to the psychology. Going back to your point about the punk rock band and your punk rock band and not being able to get some analytics, is about saying, all right, not only listen to your audience, but how do you find the audience to listen to? How do you actually go out there and find the right people who are going to be potential fans of your artist? And not only that, how do you find the right people that are going to be maximizing your time? The biggest thing that I seem to find is that artists right now, it's really easy for them to create a song because they've pretty much got all the tools now on their computer. They can buy the computer and the software for so little money that they make the song easily. It's easy to get the music distributed. Anybody can just go to any number of places and distribute it for free, and you can pay for as little as $50 and get it on iTunes. But the marketing part is still the big hurdle, and most people don't leave money for it, and they don't leave time, and they don't leave a know-how for it. And that's the key component, because unless your song is absolute top 0.001% genius, you need to have some marketing behind it, otherwise it won't go. You need to set it apart from the other 3,000 releases. So a lot of what I'm trying to talk about in Hack Your Hit is going to be, what are the different tips that you can use to do things for free to be able to make that happen. Not just say, oh, go on Facebook and Twitter, but remind people that it's called social networking for a reason. You have to be social. You have to have conversations with people. Too many artists I know just like to use Facebook and Twitter as something to be able to put and say, having a taco before I go on stage. And that's just not good enough. You actually have to talk to people, and then you take it one step further. Not only do you have to talk to people, go find the people to talk to. Think about it like you're going to a cocktail party and go and say, that person in the cool t-shirt across the room who's not talking to anybody might be interesting. I'm going to go up and talk to them. I'm going to make the initial contact. So why wouldn't you do the same thing online? Story I like to tell right now is about 2 months ago, I had somebody write a blog post about Futurehit.DNA, and I said I have to have part of the social contract here. I want to mention it on my blog. So I put up on Facebook and Twitter, hey, thanks to this blog for writing about my book. He obviously has good taste. Person wrote back and said, hey, thanks for the mention, but by the way, I'm a she, not a he. And I said, well, I apologize, but your picture, when it was shrunk down to a little postage stamp on my phone for Twitter, you looked like a he. And that led to a conversation between the two of us, not just about another tip, which is making sure that every image you have is shrunk down to a postage stamp so it can be read in multiple sites, but really about what this artist's image was about and what were they conveying. And so we had this Twitter conversation about image over 2 days. Eventually I said, all right, I've got to listen to this person's music, and as it turns out, that's one of the first artists now signed to my record label. Wow. So the key component that I tell artists there is that if this person didn't make the social initiative to mention me and mention me reading my book, even though she didn't know me from Adam, right, I would never have found her. Never have found her.
Yeah. So you had some meaningful social interaction. It wasn't just hey, follow me.
Right.
Right. It was she had read your book, she posted about it, she tweeted about it. She's part of the social world. You interacted really naturally.
That's right.
And then when it came to a point to potentially do some business, there was a real human connection there.
That's exactly right. And I think that the same thing can happen. So it's like if you go and you say that hey, I'm this punk band and people that like Blink-182 like me, you can go online and every day there are thousands upon thousands of fans who like Blink-182 raising their hand. But it's not just about necessarily going and saying hey, Blink-182 fan, come listen to my band. That might work sometimes, but it's really about going to that fan and then realize that they were talking about watching Jersey Shore last night, and then you engage them in a conversation of like, oh, I didn't really like that episode that much, and all of a sudden now you're talking about what they like, and eventually the conversation will turn to your music, and at that point you're kind of friends and they'll feel somewhat obligated to check it out. Right. And if you've done your targeting right on the early end, then they have a high likelihood to actually like your music, and then if they do that because you're now also a little bit of a friend, then they'll actually go and spread the word about you and it'll become viral.
So Hack Your Hit is it a marketing book?
Yes, it's a marketing book for musicians.
All right, and if people want to get it, where should they go to your site?
Yeah, you can Hack Your Hit will it's going to be up for pre-order. It comes out in February, but you can get both sites, both books on my site, Futurehit.DNA.com, available on Amazon. Will be Nook, Kindle, whichever way you want to consume it. Just,
right. So
very important.
And if people want to check out the singles label, they go to DigSin.com.
Yeah, DigSin.com for the singles label, and just I said, go to the site, enter in your email address, and you're on the list, and you get all our music for free for life.
Okay, one last thing.
Yeah.
I always like to end talking about some music. What are you listening to this year? What's 2011? What's a representative album or two? Or songs?
Our songs. I think it's probably more songs. I mean, I'm sure there's been some albums that have really blown me away, but they're not coming to my head right now. What's coming to my head is singles. Gautier in particular is just one where I just seem to keep coming back. Over a lot of dubstep in the UK. Rizzle Kicks is a group that I'm really, really into. And liking a lot of singles that are coming out on the German dance label Contour. Some of it's fluffy, but some of it's just a lot of fun. Over in the UK, Birdie's cover of Bon Iver's "Skinny Love" is another one that I really, really love. Lately, I've definitely been fascinated a lot more about a lot of music that's coming from elsewhere around the world. There are some things that I've liked here in the U.S., but some of the stuff I think kind of comes with a bit of overhype that kind of turns me off a bit. So,
right.
But I think there's a lot of stuff that's happening around, and that's another beauty is just being able to find a lot of this stuff that's around the world. Florence and the Machine is one that found just before it was released here in the U.S. and just fell in love with it. There's a lot of interesting things happening if it's just take the time to go look for it.
All right, we'll come back to a couple of those for me though. If people want to go check out a couple of your recommendations, give us two of the things that they might not have heard of that they can go look for, either YouTube or a streaming service or iTunes now.
I mean, I think probably a lot of them as I tend to do is just spend some time on YouTube really and finding a lot of the stuff. I mean, most of the stuff is not licensed for play on Spotify, so YouTube tends to be my go-to choice. So you can Futurehit.DNA is my YouTube profile, so you can just go to the favorites and I'm pretty good at once I find a song that I like to make sure that I favorite it. So certainly you can get to the Rizzle Kicks. There's another guy that Marlon Roulette, song's going to be released in the new year here on Interscope, German #1 song called New Age, which I just think is just a gorgeous, beautiful song. But I favorite it on my YouTube channel, so you can find it all that way.
Perfect. Jay, thank you so much for stopping by.
Yeah, thank you so much. Always great to see you.
Yeah, great to see you. And thanks to y'all for watching This Week in Music. Please do be sure to stop by thisweekend.com/music. It's there that you can sign up to download each of the programs on iTunes, so you can watch them in high def, or just listen to them when you're out with your iPod out and about in your car, where you don't crash, all that kind of good stuff. Also, like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter and subscribe on YouTube. Go on by. Thanks a lot. See you next time.
I feel good, even though I shouldn't. I'm chilling so hard, couldn't tell you where the hood is. I'm looking like $1 million, sucker.